Welcome everyone. It's so great to see you for this Wet Cement Press kitchen table reading. Today our readers are going to be Leonard Moore and Earl S. Braggs. But before we get to them, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Wet Cement Press. Michelle, you're keeping an eye on the waiting room, right? Okay, great. So, everyone's getting pretty comfortable with Zoom by now at this point in things, but just in case you're not, a couple of tips. One is to definitely try to keep yourself muted. If you hear some background noise, people talking, do a quick check to make sure it's not your mic that's unmuted. You also may want to switch to speaker view. That's, I guess I should have muted my phone. Switch to speaker view so that you can see just the focus will be on the person who's speaking. And the last tip is if you have any questions or comments for Leonard or Earl, go ahead and use the chat feature that's built into Zoom. So Wet Cement Press, we started publishing books in 2019, not that long ago. Our tagline is small handheld books of poetry, prose, and hybrid genius. What we're trying to get at with that is this sense of small, simple books, handheld, simple books. And this whole thing was inspired by post-World War II European presses and the way that they created this very simple aesthetic. Barbara's holding up Earl's book, but here's an example of one of the books by Reklam. It's a German press. And here's another one. And we basically modeled our design after this. And my wife is German, so we happen to have these books sitting around the house. And when we were trying to come up with an aesthetic for the press, we sort of gravitated in that direction to have something that was very simple, easy to replicate, recognizable, and didn't take a lot of graphic design skill to pull off, which actually none of us really have. So it was important to have something that was kind of simple, straightforward, and recognizable. I think I might have forgotten to introduce myself. I'm Thoreau Lovell. I'm the publisher and one of the editors. The other two editors are with us as well. The poet Michelle Murphy from Reno, Nevada, and the poet and fiction writer Barbara Rother, whose home base is in Asheville, North Carolina. But today we're celebrating Earl S. Braggs' new book, A Boy Named Boy, Growing Up Black in White Town During the 1960s, Hampstead, North Carolina. And it's just really is hot off the presses. Late last month, it became available. You can get it for $12 on our website or $15 through other sources. So I know many of you have already ordered copies of the book, or many people have, that is, and really are very thankful for all of you who have ordered the book. But if you haven't and you're interested, we'll be putting a link in the chat to the shop where you can pick that up later. We're also celebrating a forthcoming book by Wet Cement Press from Leonard Moore, which the tentative title right now is Long Rain. And it's a book of what I call American tanka, a Japanese form similar to haiku. And we think that that will be out in the fall. So just a couple more things. If there's anyone out there who does book reviews, we would be thrilled to send you a review copy. Just let us know either through the chat or through our website, which is wetcementpress.com. And any social media mavens out there, if you want to do whatever you're supposed to do in social media to show your enthusiasm for organizations, we would be thrilled to have some of that love come our way as well. Like I said before, if you have questions for any of us, please use the chat feature. And I think I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Barbara Rother, and she'll do the introduction. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Thoreau. Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you, all the different worlds that we get to look in on through Zoom. I'm really delighted to be here tonight with Earl and Leonard. As Thoreau mentioned, I'm in New England in the Berkshires right now, but several years ago moved from San Francisco to a place outside of Asheville. And one of the unexpected pleasures of that move was getting exposed and in touch with a whole new set of writers. San Francisco, as you all know, is a great literary center, but it's very easy when you're there to get the idea that that's where all the writers are. So when I moved to Asheville, I was really amazed at the variety and the talent and the amazing otherness of the writers in the South, and in particular of the work of Earl S. Braggs, who I met in Asheville at a reading. He read a short excerpt from A Boy Named Boy, and as soon as I heard it, I thought, wow, what a great manuscript. I hope that we could publish that. And so that's all come to pass, which I'm really thankful for. Earl is a North Carolina native from the rural backwoods fishing community of Hampstead. He's a UC Foundation and Battle Professor of English at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. He's the author of over 13 collections of poetry, Hat Dancing with Miss Bessie Smith and Negro Side of the Moon are a few of the most recent ones. Of his new book, A Boy Named Boy, Jackie Shelton Green, who is the North Carolina Poet Laureate, writes this: at the intersection of black and white, fish and snakes, rural and city, poor and more poor, public and private, a boy named Boy names what it means to live out loud, black, shamelessly declaring restorative witness as an act of resistance and the unflinching utterance of endurance. This memoir of race and survival croons and scrutinizes a sultry but sharp Southern manner. So that's Jackie Shelton Green. I want to thank her. And we will be hearing from Earl in a few minutes. I wanted to also introduce Leonard Moore, whose book we will be publishing in the fall, A Long Rain. Leonard is a very well-known international writer of haiku, and he has written hundreds of haiku and is highly anthologized. He has been the director of the Haiku Society of America, the first African-American to hold that position, and the first Southerner as well. He is also the founder of the Carolina African-American Writers Collective, which he founded and has led for the past 25 years. So he's done amazing work in building community among African-American writers in North Carolina. His most recent collection is called The Geography of Jazz, which was published in 2019 by Blair Publishing. And also he edited an anthology, All the Songs We Sing, which was in conjunction with the Carolina African-American Writers Collective. So the Tonka collection that we're publishing of Lenard's is incredible. And it has a beautiful introduction by the late Guy Davenport, who has this to say about Leonard. Leonard Moore is a Japanese poet who lives in North Carolina, or a North Carolina poet who lives in an imaginary medieval Japan. He has been a farmer, an American soldier in Germany, a school teacher. His ancestors came from Africa in chains. He seems to the world's eye to be as representative a husband, father, and citizen as any sociologist might point to a statistically ordinary, well-behaved American. And the sociologist would be wrong, for Leonard Moore is a poet, and all good poets are extraordinary, and very good ones are unique. So I wanted to welcome both Earl Braggs and Leonard Moore tonight. And one of the other amazing things about this evening is that Earl and Leonard are also part of an ongoing friendship in North Carolina. And I wanted to invite them to talk a little bit about how they've known each other, through their work, how they've known each other through being from North Carolina. And what else did I want to know? Basically that. Tell me a little bit about, or tell us a little bit about that relationship and where you first heard of each other or saw each other, and how that worked. And if you could just talk about maybe the different stories that you both sort of are telling about the same place, which I think is really interesting. So go for it. Either one of you.
Earl, you lead off.
We can't hear you,
We
Earl.
can't hear you, Earl.
As I was saying, as I already said, and you didn't hear me, the amazing thing is that Leonard has a wonderful memory. So he can tell you exactly the time that we met, where we were, who else was there, and what time of day it was, and what we had for lunch that day, and all those kinds of things. But I think it was in Kinston, North Carolina that we first met. And we've been in contact with each other for the last 30 plus years. He is amazing in that he has made an art form out of publishing. He keeps something in the mail all the time. And whereas when we first started out, he was getting individual poems published and I was focusing on books. And he probably has published in 400 plus different anthologies. And since he has such a connection with anthologies and journals and such, from time to time, he will call me and ask me to send a poem for this contest or that contest, or to be included in this journal or that journal, and especially the ones that come out of North Carolina. One thing about living in North Carolina, and I'm jealous of this, is that North Carolina is very good to its artists. From the days when we started until now, North Carolina has embraced not only the two of us, but just all of their artists. I remember in the early days, I went to a conference in North Carolina, and what I was amazed with was the fact that a number of the attendees at the conference were quote unquote little old ladies. And a lot of them were Black ladies who had stories to tell. And I've never gone to a conference before that or after that where that many attendees were people that we kind of like placed to the side. But you know, these were 65 and 75-year-old ladies mainly, and some men, a lot of Black men and Black women who were at a writing conference. And like I said, it was in North Carolina, and they were embraced and they were almost worshiped because somebody saw that they had stories to tell.
Yeah, and I remember seeing Earl at this conference too in the early 80s. And what really struck me, Earl has this poem about Jimi Hendrix that was so memorable. And, you know, I've been dealing with music for a long time, all types of music. So that poem, you know, I would always ask him about that poem or tell him I remember that poem. And, you know, we would travel throughout the state giving readings or having lunch or dinner in various places. But Earl's book, Hat Dancer Blue, that book really struck me. He has really good narrative poems and fresh metaphors. I remember it was somewhere in that book, he was describing something He called it Army Green, and I'm like, oh, I can relate to that. I know a little bit about that, or I wore fatigues when I was in the Army, so I could see it, and it was fresh. And throughout the book, he had some fresh language. So I particularly took a liking to that because you don't want to see the same old worn out metaphors or similes, or let me go ahead and use the term cliches. So I didn't see that. And Earl has a great way with dealing with narrative in his poetry. So I really like that. But then I come to find out later, he also wrote fiction. Because I remember years ago, he won a Jack Kerouac competition for fiction. So it's not surprising that Wet Cement Press has published his memoir. He has some stories that need to be told. Because I know quite a bit about Earl. We're both from southeastern North Carolina. And his city or town is only about 45 minutes to 50 minutes from my town. So I know his place, he know my place. My school has played at his school and all of those types of things. But the thing about it is Earl and I have kept in touch all of these decades. He has even visited the house here. We sit out, talk, we break bread. He invited me to where he teaches, and so I spent some time with him and Professor Richard Jackson too down there in their area. So yeah, Earl is a friend. I'm very proud of his work. He's doing really great work, and those books keep piling on. Now, I'm not surprised.
So if I could just jump in, I wonder if you would mind, Earl. I think it's so interesting that you share this regional connection. And I think when you talk about sharing stories, what I love are so many of the stories in A Boy Named Boy that I think I haven't read from the perspective of a young Black man who was part of these events. So the section I was thinking of was where you talk about the Wilmington 10. And I was going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, if maybe I could get you to read from that section tonight. And then maybe, Leonard, you can tell us if you have memories of that event also.
Hey, Barbara,
Well,
do you have a
I
page
have the.
number?
I'm sorry.
Excuse me. I have the reading plan, but I will talk for a moment about that section.
That would be
That's
great.
okay. Okay.
Sure.
A lot of people have not heard of the Wilmington 10, but it was 9 young men that I went to high school with, and a white woman from Ohio who were picked up by the police during the riots in 1971 in Wilmington, North Carolina, and dubbed the Wilmington 10. Internationally, countries as far away as Russia used it as propaganda against America. But I knew each one of them personally, and one of them I didn't like because he knocked me out on the football field, and he was 6'3", about 250 pounds or whatever. I didn't even have the ball. He was just after me, so he just like ran over there and just knocked me out, right? So of course I didn't like him. One of them was my cousin. One of them was my best friend who was a drummer. One of them I called a philosopher because he I don't know, think he ever told the truth about anything, but he was very smart. They were sentenced to, I think they got 29 years of each, and Governor Hunt commuted their sentence after about 7 or 8 years of that. And they were found, they were acquitted after about 10 years. So they actually served the time. But yeah, I was really close to a lot of them. And I think the main point of that whole thing is that I could have been one of them. I was so close to them and kind of involved in a lot of the same things.
Do you remember that event, Leonard?
Oh yeah, they were in the news, and I remember one of them because I think I knew his sister, who was a professor. I won't say where, but yeah, they were in the paper. They were on television. Yeah, I knew about it.
Yeah.
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 I'm sure it was televised nationally.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah. As I said, I think it was amazing to read a very different perspective on that, which.
Oh, one other thing, Barbara, I said I was very close to them, but I didn't tell you how close. But one night I got caught in a crossfire between the police and some members of that ultimately got picked up as the Wilmington 10.
Yeah, which you describe in the book.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's a great scene. Yeah. So you guys are welcome to talk more, or you're also welcome to start reading, Earl, if you're
You want me to start?
ready. Okay, yeah.
All right. I love to talk, but I'm going to start reading.
Yeah.
I'll start with a few notes to remember. I grew up in a small fishing community called Hampstead, North Carolina. I call it Whitetown. My 4 brothers and I were the only Black kids in the neighborhood. Unlike busing up in Boston at the time, we were bused out of Whitetown to a Black elementary school. When integration came, we were allowed to attend our Whitetown hometown school. During school opening day, my freshman year, I was voted the ugliest boy on the school bus, literally. The driver even voted. I was the only Black student on the bus. The white bus driver was a one-man Supreme Court and upheld the vote count, the verdict. Towards the end of my sophomore year, I was on a basketball team. A white boy elbowed me in the back of the head during practice. I turned into Cassius Clay. I turned into Muhammad Ali that day. All hell broke loose. Pent up frustration on both sides, Black and white, erupted into a race riot. And I was charged with inciting a riot. And so I was expelled from the Pender County school system forever. I left Whitetown and I headed for California, only to end up hitchhiking to the next town, Wilmington, North Carolina. 26 years, hard and soft years later, I disembarked upon the streets of San Francisco. Siddhartha followed me everywhere I went. And then there was the day the gypsies came to get me. I was 4, maybe I was 5, when they came to kidnap me. I saw the green Chrysler car coming up before it pulled in. But Gypsy Rose Lee saw me before I saw her, staring out from the most hypnotizingly beautiful eyes I think I've ever seen. Gypsy Rose Lee called as clear as my name. Come to Mama, my dear beautiful one. Come here, son. Maybe that was it. I don't know. I believed in logic about as much as I believed in me. Come here, son, as clear as my name. Come here, son. Night travels and accomplishments in the dark often go unnoticed. Siddhartha must have noticed. But Siddhartha's face is blank, like the Buddha he is. Never a smile, never a frown. The patience of trees is a virtue. Without knowing, I was waiting. I had waited 26 years by the time I left. I left the stove on, hoping the house would burn down. just kidding, and went out the door. I was on the road again like Willie Nelson, pot pipe in my cargo pants pocket. I left singing a Motown song. Someone once said to me, there are no conclusions to be made. All conclusions have already been made. I don't know if I believe that or not, but as I said, after 26 years, a road trip, I arrived in San Francisco with a head full of frost. Everyone there was wearing a jacket. It was the middle of June. I was looking for Jack Kerouac in Jack Kerouac Alley next to City Light Bookstore on Columbus Avenue when I stumbled upon my understanding. After learning a lesson of not buying 2 California burritos for a mid-afternoon lunch, I made it to a bookstore that Fromm had drawn on a map. Some bookstores are more literary than others. This was the top of the line. I don't think they could have gotten any more books in there. The bookstore owner was a man without direction. Scattered he was like loose pages and wind. Yet he seemed to pay attention and not pay attention at the same time. So when he told me that he had 2 poets scheduled to come in from London the next Friday night, and that he would put me on the Friday night bill, I had to believe my ears and not believe my ears all at the same time. Come Friday, sure enough, my name was on the Friday night, 7 p.m. playbill. My name, Hudson Rivers, the 3rd name on the chalkboard. After the reading, I took a bus back to my Mission District rent by the room week. There, sitting in a Paisley chair, reading pages I'd written in my Paisley book, the dim motel light reminded me of the dim kerosene lamp light that read translated Pushkin fairy tales to me when I was a kid, wild as weeds. I thought about drifting back and forth across center field, robbing white boys of home runs. I thought about stealing second base, thought about stealing home plate the way Jackie Robinson used to. I thought about my dead brother Lee, face beneath the pale Hampstead moon. Later that evening, we were supposed to go night fishing. I thought about my grandmother washing me clean fish. I thought about our little shack house in the front yard where grass refused to grow for colored people. I thought about my George Washington live oak tree, his eyes looking down upon me from the top of himself. I thought about Gypsy Rose Lee and her beautifully rich but poor kids in the back seat of that snap bean green Gypsy Mobile. I heard her voice say, as clear as my first name, "Come here, son." I thought about my father's white teeth gleaming when I told him I was going into the Air Force. I remember what he said to me 2 months before he died. "Now you can fly, son." Yes, there in that paisley colored armchair, I thought about riot years. I thought about rooms of smoke in Mrs. Davis' 11th grade English literature classroom. At the John T. Hargett High School, Mrs. Davis was the only teacher I loved. When my first book of poetry came out, Hat Dancer Blue, in 1992, Mrs. Irene Davis was the very first to send a letter of congratulations to me. It had been 21 years since I was in her class. Surprised? Not. Yet I was surprised by my tears. I guess I needed Mrs. Davis to smile upon me again. I thought about my other teachers that I still loved, Mr. McGee, Miss Ann Snyder, Mrs. Hart, and how they each took turns drawing directions for me to follow. I thought about Venus flytraps. I thought about the schoolhouse that expelled me for life because I wouldn't sit down, I wouldn't be still, I wouldn't be quiet as told to do so. And I thought about the 3 Jesuses. Any one of them could have taken down that sign that says no colored people allowed, but none of them would dare try. I thought about how each white church steeple in my childhood Hampstead hometown was broken off at the top. I thought about my cousin, Preston Lee. Lord knows that boy could sing. I thought about my great grandmother while sitting in that paisley chair. She lived to be almost 100 years old. I thought about the fish fry after her funeral. Thought about the picture of me she kept on the fireplace mantle. Yes, there in that paisley colored chair, sitting beneath a dim lamp light, I thought about the contrast of black and white, the contrast of city life and country life. I thought about the sink full of roaches and riots and our war clothes drying in the weariness of war-torn sunshine. The front line was the clothesline in my backyard. I smell tear gas. Still, I don't think the smell ever dies. Nicknaming, they say, according to Ralph Ellison, is the black art of escape. I ask myself, sitting there in that paisley chair, I ask myself, am I an escapee? Did I get out of White Town? Or still am I just a little dark complected boy named Boy catching fish and Venus flytraps? I thought about the train seat people and the train stop people getting away from somewhere, going somewhere or anywhere or nowhere. I thought about the paths my tracks would make. Maybe those gypsies did kidnap me after all. It's just that I don't remember quite how long Gypsy Rose Lee's fingers really were. She said, "Come here, son," as clear as my name. What else is it that I ended up as gypsy as any one of them? Kerouac was a gypsy. The beatnik movement was a gypsy movement. Maybe it was the goat man. He had two black and white goats that never took their eyes off of me. Maybe they knew from the beginning that remembered numbers never added up. It's hard to count the influence of insightful paisley persuasion. "Come here, son," she said. I thought about the people I met along the way, people like the salt shaking man sitting at a table next to me in a breakfast restaurant in Salt Lake City, pouring a salt shaker down his throat, telling me Jack Kerouac didn't live around there as far as he could tell. I thought about the pair of yellow tight shorts, a street artist girl outside of the 30th Street train station in Philadelphia. She was drawing pictures of tourists, $1 each. She drew a cartoon picture of me. I gave her a $5 bill because her pants were so tight and so yellow. I thought about the Amish people I met on the train ride between Philadelphia and Chicago, but did not meet on the train ride between Philadelphia and Chicago because they would not make eye contact. I thought about the palm reading lady in the psychic corner of an upstairs restaurant next door to the City Lights bookstore. I walked in. She was just sitting there with her black back out, wearing a low-cut white skirt. I gave her $5 to read my palm, but I read hers instead. She forgot to give me my money back, and I forgot to ask for it. I thought about Junior Boy, a pretend-to-be homeless black man. He told me he sleeps on park benches in the day because he can't sleep at home at night. He woke up when he saw me coming, asked me for a cigarette. I told him I didn't have any, didn't smoke, and then he asked me for a light. "People call me Junior Boy," he said. I told him I was looking for Jack Kerouac. I told him Kerouac was dead. Stunned and scattered that I was looking for a dead man. Dead serious, he said, "You ain't never gonna find that nigger." Deep into the darkest part of the evening, deep into the seat of that paisley chair, I thought twice about Spencer. Spencer told me he knew everything, and I finally realized what he meant, everything. Spencer and Fromm, each cartographers in their own map-making way. I thought about Allison and me holding hands, running through the streets of Chicago one night, jumping puddles like teenagers in love, trying to make it to the bus stop before bus number 29 decided to pull away. Winded and breathing one breath, we fell into the last seat on a damn near empty bus number 29. Allison took both my hands into hers and said, "You know what, Hudson?" "What?" I said. "You know," she said, "you know, maybe you're not looking for Jack Kerouac. Maybe Jack Kerouac is looking for you." I don't know how many moments passed when the beautiful voice I had fallen so madly in love with started singing the lyrics from a Stevie Nicks song. She sang, "When the rain washes you clean, you'll know." I woke up the next morning, still sitting in that Paisley chair, Stevie Nicks still dancing like a witch at the Red Rock in my dreadlocks. My train of thoughts had raced on by only to start red, unsmeared like red lipstick. A cold shower, a cold California burrito for breakfast. I packed my Jack Kerouac backpack, checked out of my rented room, and walked to a familiar place where overcrowded buses still stopped for strangers. I thought about all the buses of my childhood, the Seashore Line, the Eastern Shore Line, Miss Lockett's Blueberry Bus, the Myrtle Beach Bus, the Greyhound bus that carried me across the state of Texas to basic training, the U.S. Air Force bus that carried me from San Antonio to Wichita Falls, the Filipino bus that carried me to Clark Air Force Base, the Butterbean bus, the Strawberry Fields bus, the Wilmington Transit Authority city bus. And I stood there and I lined them all up in my mind, and one by one, I pulled a cord, telling each driver, "This is where I get off." The airport was crowded, Sunday morning crowded. I guess people love flying on the holiest day of the week. My Jack Kerouac backpack was heavy with thoughts that felt so light when I put it on the checked baggage scale. My boarding pass promised me a window seat. The Golden Gate Bridge is really orange, but in a certain piss-colored light, it appears golden. So I arrived in San Francisco on a train, and I left San Francisco on a jet airplane. No more nights on the train for me for a while. No, I did not leave my heart in San Francisco, but San Francisco left its heart in me. Like a Tennessee Williams play, Tom looking for a piece of blue glass. No, I did not go to the moon. I went much further. So I think, do I have time to read one poem?
Sure.
This poem is called "In Which Language Do I Keep Silent?" And it's for a modern dancer. It's one of the few times that I've ever collaborated with someone, and I've been asked many times, and mostly by musicians, but I feel that my poems tend to be so musical until it's very difficult to collaborate with a musician, but I may be wrong. But anyway, she was doing some silent music in her dance, and it reminded me of my poetry. And so after she finished dancing that night, I walked up to her and I said, "I'm not trying to pick you up, but I love your dance, and I wonder if you would consider dancing and me reading poetry." And so she agreed, and so we rehearsed. And during the rehearsal, we rehearsed about 6 weeks, and during the rehearsal, this poem was born and matured. It's called "In Which Language Do I Keep Silent?" No one knows how to spell the mathematics of falling in love, but I know that if a number is raised to the first power, the exponent is usually not written. I know that the absolute value of a number is that number without its sign. Without a sign, there's no way to tell who I am. Today, I will not give any indications. I know that the angular velocity of your movement is too beautiful to name, and I've come to recognize you as a dancer in lines of my own poetry. It's a funny thing how books can be read upside down and maps get us most lost. I know this from experience. Lately, I find myself looking at maps, measuring the distance between cities. 1 inch equals 25 miles, 1/25th of 1 inch equals 1 mile. Small towns are represented as dots. I question the mathematics of it all. My whole numbers have become fractions on a November calendar. I've learned to count parts of each square. I know what it's like to have nothing but time. The night I first saw you dance, I followed the softness of your steps across the floor, across the studio, every spin taken into consideration, every jump. I know the shortest distance between us is a straight line. I want to leap with you, but not tonight, because when I divide the time of day into the time I've known you, multiplied by the number of times you've crossed my mind lately, the answer is way too early to tell what I'm feeling. I know the wrong answer is not always wrong. Do you know how to tango? Would you teach me to ride music in wide open space? Would you teach me to dance to the unexplained, delivered as the unexplored dances to the patterns of treasure maps? Would you teach me to close my eyes when I kiss? I know that the coefficient of a to the second power is 1. I know what it feels like to be alone in a room too many nights in a row. I know how to fly without wings. If you were a jet airplane traveling at 7.5 kilometers while gaining altitude at a constant rate, if you traveled between points 5.8 kilometers apart, what is the gain in altitude? I would figure it out and meet you at the vertex. I know the Pythagorean theorem. I know that some mornings my dreams lie to me to make me feel better. I laugh trying to figure out the ones I now have. I'm not saying I dream about you. I'm saying you're in my dreams, and most often I wake up falling. I know that the distance I fall equals 1/2 times the acceleration times the time squared it takes me to fall. According to maps, my silence is 1 mile away from you in either direction. I know that speed equals distance divided by the time I sit here and wait. I know exactly how long it should take if I were to measure your gaze in either of the 2 languages I now speak. I light myself another cigarette. I don't say a thing. I ponder the velocity of silence. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Earl. Wonderful. So now we have Lenard, who has a very different style. I love this long riff and narrative, and now we're going to go, I think, to another aesthetic and another culture there. So,
Hey, Lenard.
as you like, Lenard, take it away.
No, Lenard, before you start, this is Thoreau. When you were talking earlier, that it was so loud that there was some distortion.
Gotcha.
So, I think the
Back
mic is,
up.
yeah, the mic just isn't good enough to take the full volume. So just think about that a little bit. And
Hey, back up some.
yeah, there you go. Perfect.
How's that?
It's great.
Okay. So I will read first from the Geography of Jazz. Blair published it, so I'm grateful to them. It's a beautiful book. I like what they've done. So I want to read the very first poem first, titled Swinging Cool. The bassist hugs that bass, plunks it, ting, boom, ting, boom. The drummer beats and booms. Saxophonist weaves notes, oscillates, blows, and the pianist finger dances on the keys, swinging at the haven. Musicians spark the sheet music stands and angled microphones, blue backdrop modulating that tempo. They work the tune, drumsticks knocking time, piano plucking our ears, bass man still hugging the bass, straight sets, walls thrumming, steady as the spring moon, inciting the indigo sky. This poem came, I wrote it while listening to Ramsey Lewis play at Enloe High School here. Back in 1989 on a Sunday. I did not know he was going to be in town. I was watching the news, sitting on the bed writing. And so they announced it on the news that he was going to play there because it was supposed to be outside at Fayetteville Street Mall, part of Art Exposure annual festival. So because of rain, they moved it indoors. So I wrote this while he was playing instrumentally those 2 hours. And then I got to interview him backstage afterwards. Here is the poem. Sunday evening for Ramsey Lewis. As lights glow red in the distant background, he sits at the great black grand, fingers flutter across the keys. 2 black men pluck their guitars' tight gold strings, and the percussionist tings the cymbals. Their heads bob, the audience claps. Band members pat their shiny black shoes. The silver gold instruments gleam brighter than the spotlight beaming down on the glossy stage. The piano's chords in tune, better than, oh yes, than any heart thump. Jesus' eyeglasses follow his fingers every moment. Ah, the harmony, now genius, tall and lean, stands, bows, then thumps onto the seats and jazzifies the piano. Man, his pants, the color of the piano, sway as if the wind beats them. No one in the audience sits without bobbing their heads as the music progresses while the band's shadow heads rock on the curtains, turn purple, then red. Everyone walks off the stage except the drummer who does his thing, drumming until the others come back, playing again. That harmony peels the walls bare. Oh, I love it. Can't you hear it too, my friends? They jamming. Every now and then the audience erupts. The tilted man makes that bass talk, My feet tap against the tile floor. Everybody's fingers pop, snap, pop, popping until the chill night. Listen, let these words throb in your head until you let go of your rocking, clapping self. And I want to read one more from the Geography of Jazz, Jazz Suite. So I used a series of haiku or a haiku sequence for this. Jazz Suite, S-U-I-T-E. Spring cleaning, tracery of dust on the Duke Ellington bookmark. An Armstrong reframe, a metal lock circles the campus courtyard. Steamy evening, shadows plastering all the cafe walls. August heat, a record warps on the dashboard. Quartet in the courtyard, hazy stars. Alone with the moon, concentric circle of dust on old records. Ladybug on the lampshade, last bars of piano. Late winter, a vibraphone opens the set inside the arena. Because I just read a haiku sequence. I'm going to read my haiku sequence from the anthology, All the Songs We Sang. Blair also published it. My haiku sequence has a line in it that reads, "Shake loose my skin." That is the title of one of Sonia Sanchez's books. So here's the poem, haiku sequence for Sonia Sanchez. Your whole notes wake the dormant trees, the wind's breath, drums thump, pulsing of the heart song, the opening sky, jazz and haiku, shake loose my skin, a dusting of pollen, insistent running of the long river, Euro acapello, my black hands cupping the sunlight, jacuzzi bubbles, orange lilies bow, your noontime strut up the sidewalk, rain long gone, I recite the syllables of your language, evening walk, I catch your riff in my voice. And so I also want to read my bop from All the Songs We Sang. I have two bops in here, but I'll read one of them. Father Michael Weaver created or invented the bop at Cave Canon back in the 1990s. And in the bop, you have a complaint, and you resolve the complaint or has a resolution at the end. You also have a reframe in the poem, which you supposedly live from a song, but because I didn't want to deal with copyright issues, I invented my own reframe. So here's the poem. Bop, coaching poets. In class, my 6-foot-tall student next to the window, dreads locked on her back, says guys on the b-ball team write poetry, don't want it public. Up front, I nod. Know what you must do? Don't be satisfied. I hand out 2 poems. Tell them Quincy Troop, Yusef K. penned them. Their riffs clear. They peer up, wide eyes, heads tilted like cups. They never give a signal that they write lines that sizzle with strong light. Know what you must do? Don't be satisfied. 3 decades I lived the words that flame my pages and do not apologize for writing. A man like me knows what to tell his students without shooting jive. Know what you must do? Don't be satisfied. Now I want to read 2 haibun that I just wrote for the forthcoming book from Wet Cement Press, Long Rain. So I want to end with those 2 haibun. And I'm kind of riffing off Earl. Narratives or stories he was telling and, about I guess race relations and various things and being bussed. So I know something about that too, I believe. So here we go. I tried to create titles that will deal with the sections in the book, and I won't give any of that away. Hopefully it'll lead you to want to buy the book. So I'm just going to give you an appetizer. You could buy the meal, the buffet. Breeze cooled Monday, 1965. For my knee brother, not yet born. Riding the school bus from my black community in Jacksonville to the next town, to Silverdale Elementary School. I stayed in my seat, not within bicycle range, but far away. It's the black elementary school where we must travel. We keep quiet. Our black bus monitor sits up front and doesn't take any mess from us. Anyhow, she knows our parents. My aunt drives us and sometimes drop me off at my great-grandmother's. I love going to her house. She loves to cook from her garden, her fields, our ancestors' ways. What really fascinates me, she usually makes a quilt with wooden frame, rectangling up her living room. Yes, I love watching her brown hands stitch elegance, patch by patch, old shirts, old pants. I remember how worn clothes could turn summers into quilts. Sweet corn wafts from the black iron skillet, her hem humming. And the other one is, wow, I have 3 titles. I'm going to just pick one of the titles. Watery Tuesday, April 9th, 1968. I remember that 9th day, a learning day. We're lining up at the classroom door, not knowing what to expect, but obeying our 4th grade teacher. She's the only white teacher at our school. If we got out of line, she'll say, bend over and grab your anchors. We didn't want to feel the smack of her tan plastic baseball bat. We loved to sing songs in Spanish and dance in her class. Today we walk single file, the straightest line to the cafeteria, where the glossy wooden stage waits like the black and white TV. We watch Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral. We weep, salt water, keep sobbing until we return to class. Spring daylight, a pot or pan bangs behind us. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you,
Oh,
Lenard. That was
thank you.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And Earl too, really a great complimentary reading, I think, both in style and in content. So it's really just can't thank you enough. Let's see. I
I
think
think it's fine if people want to catch up a bit, if there are friends that you haven't talked to or want to say hello to. And we need to remind you, if you haven't yet bought Earl's book, please do. It's important to support work like this for all of us. And I think soon you should be able to pre-order Leonard's book in
might
a
be
month.
a couple of months, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
But soon, yeah, soon for sure.
Yeah.
So feel free to unmute yourself if you guys want to say hello or goodbye or whatever. And we'll see if anybody has anything they want to add.
Yeah.
Are there questions?
Sure.
You know, I don't see questions in the chat. I have been kind of glancing at it, Earl. But it's mostly, you know, wonderful, how great, love this line, you know, that kind of thing.
People can ask questions now too. If someone has a comment or question, go for it.
You know, if nobody else does, I have a question for you, Earl, just about your initial connection with or to Jack Kerouac. How did that come about? And is that something that's sustained over the years, or was it just you know, an interest of yours at that time?
I don't quite remember where I first heard about Kerouac. I was probably pretty young, but I think the seed that grew out of my Kerouac relationship started with when I realized that Kerouac and I had a similar childhood. That is, his brother Gerard died when he was about 8 years old, and when Gerard was about 8 years old. And Kerouac said that he embodied his dead brother, and so he lived his life as two people.
Wow.
And my brother was electrocuted when I was 12 and he was 14. And I've always felt that I've just kind of embodied him for my life, in my life. And so it's just, that's kind of the connection that I made.
I really enjoyed the Kerouacian kind of prose in the memoir. So, I mean, it wasn't just the biography. I think seemed like there was a connection to the syntax and the sort of flow of language that is such a big part of Kerouac's work.
Yeah, that's when I wanted Jack Kerouac prize. That was one of the things that the person who awarded the prize or the critique of my writing or whatever said that this guy is not trying to write like Kerouac, yet it's very much like Kerouac.
I think it's interesting that Kerouac, of course, was riffing on jazz, right?
Right.
So it makes sense to me that there's a tree that you're both going back to, right?
Yeah, Kerouac's Buddha was Charlie Parker,
Right.
the famous saxophonist. So he tried to write like Charlie Parker played a saxophone.
Yeah.
I was, when I read your work, Earl, I thought it was just an interesting kind of juxtaposition that Thoreau and I and Michelle all lived in San Francisco and sort of had very similar experiences. I think we talked about that around city lights and around hitchhiking and reading Kerouac. So I thought it was interesting that we had that juxtaposition coming from really different places, but kind of meeting up.
Yeah, yeah. I've been trying to remember what bookstore that was that let me read.
City Lights.
No, I don't think so.
Well, it wasn't City Lights, it was some other one.
It was a
Yeah.
nice bookstore. It's a bookstore that has really nice furniture and it has famous writers' plaques on the back of each chair.
Huh.
Remember what street it was on?
Museum. That would have been around.
No, it was a little bookstore. I would
Yeah.
get lost in every city that I
We'll
was
look
in.
for
So
it.
I had no
Yeah.
idea where I was.
Yeah. Hey, so Lenard, what was your path to?
John had a question too, so. anyway.
Okay, so let's ask this, and then you can wait if you want. Just your path to haiku and tanka. I'm just curious how that came about.
Well, first I say I took this class at the University of Maryland overseas in Stuttgart. At that time, it was West Germany. So it was a long time ago. I got out of the military 40-some years ago, so it was a long time ago. Anyway, in that class, my literature book I brought back when I got out of the Army. So January 1982, I was in bed sick with the flu. And I guess I got a little bored. I don't know. But anyway, I saw that literature book. I got it and I started flipping through it and I saw haiku. Boy, was I naive. I thought they was simple. I'm like, oh, I can write this. I had some unsuccessful first attempts, or let me say, you have to fail to get where you got to go. So yeah, that's what happened. But what I did is I read a lot about Eastern philosophy, Zen, haiku. I was reading everything in R.H. Blythe's 4 volumes about haiku, Harold Henderson book, An Introduction to Haiku, all those books way back then. And so I continued to write, but, thank goodness there were editors at these haiku magazines back then who took the time to offer comments, especially Dragonfly, a quarterly of haiku, Lorraine Ellis Hart. one of the real famous haiku poets way back then. She went by the name Tumbo. So she would offer comments on people's haiku. And then some other editors might do that too. And then I remember the editor of Modern Haiku. He was pretty tough. So I kept trying and I kept trying and I kept trying. And then eventually I would get in there. But then after I published in there so much, then it got even harder. He was like, this wouldn't hold up to your reputation. I'm like, what have I done? But anyway, so I thank him too, so, there were some of the editors who would really push you. I thought some of them were okay, but evidently not. So I would go back to the drawing board. But I must say that I started out like most people were taught 5-7-5, the traditional way. But as it progressed, most of the contemporary haiku poets were not writing 5-7-5. You probably can hardly get that published nowadays. They write, I guess you call it contemporary haiku, which might be something like 3-5, 3 beats or something. But I don't need to talk about that. It takes so long to talk about haiku. It involves so much. It's not simple. Juxtaposition of unlike images, contrast, kigo, Kigo, a Japanese word, means season word. I can go on and on, but I've been doing this for decades, Next January will be 40 years I've been writing haiku. Next year would also be 40 years I've been writing tanka. So, I've been writing poetry much longer than that. So I don't want to take up the time. It takes a long time to really get into what haiku is. But it's not what we learn in school, that we're taught. It is about nature. But you want to throw the syllables out the window, But I will say one more thing to not talk too long about it. No abstract language. Concrete detail, specificity. And then there's much more, but maybe you'll buy some of the books. I don't know. Well, I did read a haiku sequence from the Geography Jazz. Hopefully somebody will buy that. And I read a haiku sequence from all the songs we sang. Hopefully somebody will buy that. It takes a long time to really get into what haiku is. I don't want to take all of your time with that.
So was there another question that I sort of jumped in front of, Barbara?
John.
No?
Maybe I'll buy it.
All right, there you go.
I'll buy both of them, and I'll buy the other ones that I can find.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, that's a fact.
So I
Wow.
wanted to, if I can jump in, I just wanted
Well, let me just
both
say.
Andrea and John are,
I just wanted to
also
say
Westman authors, Lenard. Sorry.
Huh?
Right. Well, yes, we're authors as well, but I just wanted to say, Mona Ohari, the beauty of imperfection, everything that you were just talking about. But what came up for me, and it may be, wabi sabi, but on the other hand, with both of you extraordinary writers, I was just blown back. But also, what connected in the moment for me that may not connect for others is that Murakami, the great Japanese writer, has a new book of short stories out, and I just read his story on Charlie Parker and haiku and tanka yesterday, and it just freaking blew me out too, because Charlie Parker comes back and he says, I was dead. I was a young man and I was dead. And in your dream, you brought my music back to life. And you feel that in the story, because it is a kind of story, but I felt it in both of your writings in the way that, in spite of the very manifest differences of form and structure and so forth, but nonetheless, that kind of river flowing between them, and the beauty of that tradition that's carrying on in the river of your work, that's bringing life for people like us who are listening and have an opportunity. I wish millions of people could hear that and feel the spirit of it, and the life of it, and the history of it. And anyway, I don't want to speak too long. I just wanted to say thank you.
I can tell that you write haiku. Anybody wouldn't get up here and say wabi sabi. That deals with beauty. I know what that's dealing with too in haiku. I know all about it. I know about Yigan, mystery. I can talk about haiku on and on, but I won't take up the time. So thank you. I know you know something about haiku. Yeah, I know that. I know a little bit about it.
And Charlie Parker, you know, he's there, he's blowing away right now. He's blowing away, you know, and your story, you know, it's like, it's not just Jack Kerouac, man.
That's right.
It's Parker coming through him.
Bebop jazz.
Right.
Well, maybe on that note, I
Good.
want to thank you all for coming. Thank you, Earl and Lenard.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, wow, thanks. It's good seeing everybody. Meg, Celestine,